I'm going to make a drawing of this sculpture. I found it on the website of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. So it's a very, I think it's a neoclassical sculpture, and I'm going to do the face especially. So let's start with the outline. I usually start with an eye. I will zoom in a little bit. And I'm constantly measuring the angles. And I have to look, where is this here? That's around here. The other eye. That's too far. Oops. So we have the head almost outlined here. Let's say the face of the head. And I want to do a bit more of the hairs as well. This form here. And this is at this height, so we can measure this here. And then we have this here. And then I need to have this coordinate, so I can draw this angle. And then we have here this position. So to a certain extent, you develop a certain sense of measurement in the eye. And to a certain extent, you measure using, let's say, angles that you can look for. And you can also trace this image. I will put a photograph of this sculpture so you in the description of this video, so you can download it from Patreon. And now I have roughly the outlines on the paper. And I would like to start adding tonal values. I'm going to zoom out a little so we have the whole image. And whether I'm drawing the outlines or I am adding tonal values, I usually start with the eyes. I need to erase a little bit here. It would be the best thing for me to do to just leave this white of, to leave the white of the paper white, but I see that I messed it up. So I'm going to take an eraser. This looks like a white pencil, but it's actually an eraser. So now I have erased some of the graphite. I might need it in the future, so I just leave it here. And this is the fun part, adding shadows. So this is a very clear situation. The light comes from the right, from a highlight source. You can see that from the nose here. And you have a clear division between dark and light. So I just add shadows. And here you have the reflected light, so there is this area here where a lot of light is being reflected to the underside of his chin and his jawline. So I might need the eraser to get this chin lighted as well. And I just draw the large areas now. And to me the drawing comes to life now by adding shadows and tonal values. Carefully doing the eye sockets. And I have the habit to not sharpen this pencil. This is a mechanical pencil with a 2mm graphite pencil in it. I think it's either HB or B or 2B, around that range. It's soft enough to easily draw shadows, and I tend to not sharpen this. I mean, you have this sharpener here, but it's always such a mess that I don't really like to do that. And I think it has its charm to not sharpen it, to just use it this way, because it's, in a way, it sharpens itself by using it. So if you want to have certain lines, it can be fairly precise, but I actually like this broader approach in these kind of drawings. And while I am drawing the shadows, I try to be sensitive to this area of reflected light. And when I look at this picture, I see that the face has its own build up to the highest light, but this is even lighter. So to get this the right lightness, to get this to the right lightness, I need to carefully give the forehead, for example, a tonal value, a very light tonal value as well. Only in the tip of the nose or something, it can be the white of the paper, but to work this out in tonal values properly, I need to darken the forehead a little bit. And you can use your phone as a reference, as for your reference, but I always prefer to print it out on laser printer paper. I have a little laser printer. It's just a cheap printer, but it works for me well enough to print out these source images so I can make a drawing of them, of these. And I'm looking at the forms of these shapes here. I try to draw them as well in my drawing. Draw them as well in my drawing. That's a really ugly sentence. If I would write a text, I would try to say that otherwise, but I'm improvising what I'm saying here. And as I get along further in the drawing, I can add some more darker accentuations. As you can see here, I smudged a bit, so there is some graphite on my pink, on my little finger. So I need to use this printer paper to keep the paper clean, where my hand is touching the paper sometimes. So now I can gradually refine the forms. And maybe I use that eraser pencil again. I don't really want visible hatchings. I'm hatching now, but this drawing is built up from these areas of tonal value, and they are in a sense hatchings, but you don't see these separate lines anymore in most of the areas. So I try to avoid that in my drawing, that you see these separate lines of the hatchings too much. Because it would be a drawing of a different character if you see those too visibly. And so as you develop a drawing, it develops its own character, I would say. So at a certain moment you notice that you are not using the kind of hatchings that you use in other drawings, and then it's good to be sensible to that. And either you can use them, or you can choose to not use them and say, well, I keep this drawing within a certain style or within a certain technique. And I'm not working too detailed. I'm not drawing the exact lines of how the sculptor made it, but more or less I want this here and this area here, but I'm not exactly doing it in a photographic way or something. But I try to get a fairly accurate image of this sculpture as a whole, but in the details I'm quite loose, I think. And now I want this area to be a bit tighter, a bit better, more accurate. And it's good to think about what kind of drawing that you want, because are you going to draw all the tonal values? Are you going to draw detailed or not? So when you are developing a drawing, it's good to think about those things at a certain moment. Sometimes it just flows out of what you're doing automatically. And now I'm working on details to get it more accurate. And this is slightly darker than this area, so try to work on that in a subtle way. And now I want this chin properly. I wouldn't say finished because I will get to it later as well, but it needs something here. Now I'm adding even darker accentuations. So it's good to save the darkest accentuations for last, so you can always work on certain things that need improvement. You can always go a bit darker. Here I'm actually adding hatchings, but I need dark accentuations, sharp accentuations. So, and when I keep adding smooth transitions, it stays within a certain range tonally, and it needs some extra darkness in the certain areas. Let me put it that way. And now I want to work on some more tonal values. Forehead. That nose. I didn't do that well. I need some work here. I think that looks a bit better. And there are stars here. I don't think I'm going to draw them all. It becomes a bit tedious, but I'll see what I can do to suggest a sort of structure. I just draw the shadow areas a bit. So there's a suggestion of these ornaments, how do I call them? And I would like to make the background dark as well, just like in the photo, because I like the clair-obscur effect. So let's start with that, because it's quite an important part of the appearance of the drawing to get the background dark. I could erase this, but I'm going to make it dark anyway. But I'm now going to add some darkness in the back, because the character of the drawing will change a bit by doing that. And I want to make this side dark as well. And when I've darkened it, there's a new situation, so to speak. But the question is, am I going to make it really dark, or just like this, or am I going to go over that and make it very dark, and darker than this? So as the drawing develops, I will make that kind of decisions. And now I feel it's too much sort of gray areas, so I want to make the background really dark, or in certain areas at least really dark, or darker than it is now anyway. And it's also a matter of composition, to what extent you make this all dark. So I want the area around the face dark, but it gets lighter here, and that's also how do you develop the overall image. Like I said, the composition of it. So that's also plays a part. I mean, I could make it all dark, but is that aesthetically pleasing? More pleasing than leave it a bit sketchy on the outside. And now I see that all kinds of areas need reworking, because this is too light for me now, and this also. When you look at the source photograph, it's much darker, and not that we always have to follow the source photograph and everything, but as I see it now, I want it darker too. I want to have this darker now. I'm adjusting the form of her neckline a little bit. Neck. And this needs improvement too. So when you are working on tonal values and you still have to adjust, let's say, the background to such an extent. Somewhere in the middle of the drawing process you can better do that background, because the situation will change in such a way that you have to adjust tonal values of the drawing again, of the face now, as you can see, and things become clearer in that sense that you know what's too dark and what's too light. And otherwise it can remain in sort of sketchiness on a white piece of paper, but now it has a dark background, so all kinds of relationships between dark and light change by adding a dark background. Now I just want to work on the tonal values of the face. Make it more harmonious by adjusting tonal values to the background and the relations between the relation between the face and the neck, for example, what I'm doing now. So this can be darker. Adjusting the form of the eye socket. And I just go from here to there. Whenever I see something that needs to be done, I just add some more detail or tonal value or whatever it needs. And this area is the lightest area, so this needs to be a little darker than this. So I add a little bit of tonal value here. And here too. And now I'm going to focus primarily on the face for a while. And all kinds of details can be improved a little. And now I'm finally getting the feeling that the character of the drawing approaches what's in the photograph, in the sculpture. It needed some adjustments still, so for a long time it was a bit off for my as I felt it, as I saw it, but I get the feeling that it's coming closer now in character to what's in the photograph, in the sculpture.
is de uitslag in de derde uur is Hiram fietsen. 24e plaats in de etappe. Hardfietsen kun je allemaal, als je in de toer mag staan, dan hoor je al tot de betere renners van de wereld. Team Jumbo-Visma is klassement par équipe, hoeveel klassement. Wij als Nederland willen daar nog wel eens aan bij. Spanje bijvoorbeeld. Daar heb ik deze al zo'n toets of zo. Dat is nooit geweest. Ja, natuurlijk.
Trying to get the hairs also done.
als je daar nog wil hebben. Ik zou zeggen, probeer het nog een keer en in een week, dan heb je nog meer gehad, dan kun je zelf de ton erachter leggen. Maar dit is niet dit terrein, kijk maar, dit is allemaal nog sloot door bomen. Het is een beetje open, het is een beetje een beetje juist.
I took a little break. Sometimes it's good to leave a drawing alone for a little while. I'm actually not sure what I'm seeing here. On the print it looks like hair, but I'm not sure if it's in the sculpture. Yes, it is here. Weird. Very, very good sculpture. And slowly I'm approaching the moment to stop with this. I think it's a nice drawing. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at this. Although trying this eraser pencil now. I just want to add a little bit of texture here. Otherwise it's too white, so to speak. Here as well, so this has to be the lightest area, but breaking the white a bit. Yes, I'll leave it at this. Thank you for watching.